One of the privileges I have as a priest is that I get to spend a lot of time with people as they're approaching death. Now, this past year, I spoke with a woman in her mid-50s who was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She was given about a year to live. Now, imagine that. You're married, you have kids, perhaps some young grandchildren. One day you go to bed and you're happy and all is right and well with the world. And the next day, you wake up to discover that you're dying. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. We had a conversation and I was trying to comfort her, encourage her, let her know I was supporting her in prayer. And I just asked her, I said, "Are you afraid to die?" She said, "Yes." I mean, who wouldn't be, right? Then she asked me the question, she said, "Father, do you believe in life after death?" Now, I mean, I am a priest, right? So it's kind of comes with the job description. But it's a great question. Do you believe in life after death? In fact, it's one of life's great questions. Now, why is it a great question? Because here's the truth. We're all dying. I'm dying. You're dying. Everyone you love is dying. Each and every day we take one step closer to the end. And the question, do you believe in life after death? It hangs over the whole of our lives. In this past year, I think we've experienced collectively our mortality in a way unprecedented, certainly in my own life, probably for many of us, if not most of us. Today we remember the tragic deaths of 22 people in Nova Scotia, Portapique, April 19th, 18th, 19th, 2020. We hold them and their families in our hearts, in our prayers. I ask you to remember them and pray for them today, even right now with us. And so this question on a day like today, do you believe in life after death? It sort of confronts us. Do you believe in life after death? Now, if I ask you, but why? Like, why do you believe? Many of you will probably answer, yeah, of course, like I believe in life after death. But I want to ask you, like, on what basis do you believe that? Sometimes I think we believe because it's therapeutic, because it helps us grapple or grasp with the suffering and death that we see in the world. Sometimes we believe perhaps because it's like wishful thinking. It helps us cling to a little bit of hope that we'll see the people that we love and have lost again one day. But just because we want it to be so doesn't mean that it is. And so I ask you, why do you believe in life after death? Now, for me and for the church, the answer to that question lies in the season that we celebrate, even today, as we reflect on the extraordinary events of Easter. See, at the heart of our faith is an absolutely extraordinary event and an extraordinary claim that Jesus of Nazareth died and then came back from the dead. That's what's at the heart of our whole faith. Now, it's an extraordinary claim because if he came back from the dead, it means there is life after death. And that changes absolutely everything. If it's true, then perhaps no other event in history is more important. But if it's not true, nothing is less important. In fact, our whole faith, as we know it, everything we do, you watching right now, we'd all be wasting our time, and we may as well, I'd rather be taking a nap if it's not true. We could be playing snakes and ladders. That would be a better use of our time. And so this question is so critical for us. I used to get into these discussions with my friend Josh in high school, university. He was an atheist, continues to be an atheist. And we would get into these great philosophical discussions and arguments, and they were really interesting. And inevitably, at some point, we would keep coming back to the question of the resurrection. And his constant refrain was, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And just like that, he would sort of dismiss the whole thought of the resurrection. Well, and maybe because, well, of course, resurrection is a faith thing, and we don't need evidence for it because it's a thing of faith, right? But that's not exactly true. Now, I wasn't smart enough at the time to have really delved into that question, because it never occurred to me to ask Josh, what would extraordinary evidence look like for you? In other words, like, Josh, what would you need to see in order to believe? I think that's a question each of us have to ask ourselves. What do we need to see or to know in order to believe? Because you see, for me, I do think there's extraordinary evidence that point to an extraordinary event of the resurrection. And I'll just start with, I'll mention a few, and I'm just mentioning these very superficially because there's many more, and we could go so much deeper, and I've already wasted 4 of our 18 minutes together. So there's very superficially. But I want to start with the Bible, because I think the Bible is an extraordinary piece of evidence that points to the resurrection. Of course, you'll say, well, like many objections I hear, well, but you Christians, your whole belief in the resurrection comes from a single book. Yeah, that's kind of true, but it's also kind of not true. Because the New Testament, the second half of the Bible from which we get information about the resurrection, it's not really just one book. It's 27 primary source documents written by 9 different authors, which all name different witnesses to the events of the resurrection. It's actually more like a small library. And here's what's really extraordinary about it. That the New Testament doesn't come to us from the resurrection. No, I said that wrong. Okay, let me try again. The resurrection doesn't come to us from the New Testament. The New Testament comes to us from the resurrection. In other words, the New Testament wouldn't exist if there were not people who claimed to have seen Jesus alive, who claimed to have touched him, to have heard his voice. Our belief in the resurrection events, they precede the existence of the New Testament. The New Testament are simply the documents, the recorded witness testimony of people who have seen Jesus alive after he was dead. They're filled with names and places of people who witnessed Jesus alive after they witnessed him die. And here's the other thing about the New Testament. These documents, they're not written for us 2,000 years later. They're written for their contemporaries. So in today's gospel, when they're talking about what Cleopas saw in the presence of Jesus, Cleopas was probably still alive when the Gospel of Luke was written. Which means you could go back to Galilee and ask Cleopas if what he saw accords with what was written. What's extraordinary about the Bible is that what's extraordinary about the Bible, I totally lost my spot here. What's extraordinary about the Bible is that, oh man. What's extraordinary about the Bible is that, there we go, the number of different primary sources, these documents, the number of unique witnesses named in those documents, and the substantial agreement of the facts among what is written. It's extraordinary. Another piece of evidence that I think is, perhaps on its own is not extraordinary, but when you match it up with all the other evidence that we have, is the historical fact of the empty tomb. Okay? Now we know historically that the Roman soldiers after they placed Jesus in the tomb, the Romans posted soldiers precisely because they expected the followers of Jesus to try and steal the body. And yet somehow, on Sunday morning, there was no body to be found anywhere. Despite the fact that it was in the vested interest of the Jewish authorities and the Roman authorities to produce a body if it existed, to go back and take it back from the Christians who perhaps had stolen it. But nobody in 2,000 years has been able to produce the body of the most famous person who ever lived. Not the Romans, not the Jewish authorities, not the Christians, and no archaeologists. Well, why? We know where all the bodies of the early apostles are today. We know where they are buried. And yet nobody knows where Jesus' body is. Why? Because there is no body. Now here's another thing I think is extraordinary. That the 12 apostles all got on the same side of the table and posed long enough for the painter to capture this picture. Okay, not really. What I think is extraordinary is the story of those 12 apostles. Here's what we know. We know where their bodies are. And we know how they were executed for their belief in the resurrection. Now, you and I both know that there are people who die for things that they believe in, even sometimes when those beliefs don't turn out to be true. History is full of examples. But we also know, you and I, that nobody dies for something that they know to be a lie. And here's what else we know historically, that all of those 12 apostles, on the night Jesus was executed, they ran and they hid and they denied that they even knew Jesus because they were so afraid for their lives. They were cowards. And here's what else we know, that those same 12 men who were cowards, within a matter of days, began preaching and proclaiming in open that Jesus had risen from the dead. And we know historically that at least 11 out of the 12 of them were all executed for their belief in the resurrection. And so my question is, what could have possibly happened that had transformed 12 men from cowards and taken away their fear of death? What would they have had to see? What would they have had to experience? The only logical explanation is that something extraordinary happened to them. Something so extraordinary that it took away their fear of death itself. Something like the resurrection, perhaps. Now, you know what else I think is extraordinary? That for 2,000 years, hundreds of millions, if not billions of people, have experienced healings, miracles, spiritual experiences, all that they all attribute to the person of Jesus. Like, that's a growing body of evidence over time. And that includes people who are watching today online, includes myself. I've seen some extraordinary things that only make sense in light of Jesus, not as a historical person, but as someone who is alive and active in the world today. So when that dying woman asked me, "Father, do you believe in life after death?" I was able to say yes. I do believe in life after death. I believe in life after death not because it's a way of clinging to hope in the face of tragedy. Not because it's therapeutic for me or comforting to think that one day I will see again the people that I've loved and lost. No, I was able to say, I believe in life after death because of an extraordinary event. I believe that there's extraordinary evidence to support that Jesus rose from the dead. And I've come to experience Jesus personally, to encounter him as alive, not as some dead guy, but as someone who is active and present in my life, someone who I can communicate with and experience. And Jesus makes this extraordinary promise that all those who believe in him will not die, but live forever. So yes, that's why I believe in life after death. Jesus truly rose from the dead. It's extraordinary, and it changes everything. It means that even though you and I, we're terminal, we're dying every single day, approaching death. It means that death doesn't have to be the end. That for all those who place their trust and their faith in Jesus and live according to his way with their lives, that death is not the end, but it's the beginning. It means that in the face of tragedies, mindless acts of violence, like we remember today, that death and tragedy don't have the final say. That in the end, it's Jesus and life and love that are victorious. And if Jesus rose 2,000 years ago, it means that he's not dead, he's alive. And we can know him, we can experience him, that he is present right here today. We can hear his voice as he speaks to us through the scriptures, the living word of God. Now, if you're listening to this today and you're like, whoa, wait a second. Maybe I've been thinking about this wrong. Maybe is something I've been missing. Well, the best way I know about how to go deeper and discover this person of Jesus and discover him as not dead but alive is through something we do called Alpha around here. Now, it's a bunch of people who have some of the same big questions. Is there more to life? Is there life after death? Who is Jesus? Is he really who he says he is? Those people watch a video together that address some of these questions, and then have a small group discussion and grow together as they journey through these questions and grapple with them. You get to meet amazing people, and we're starting Wednesday evenings and Thursdays over lunch, starting this week. So if you're interested, if any of this resonates with you, I encourage you, go to saintbenedict.ca/alpha, get more information, sign up. You might know somebody in your life who's grappling with these questions in their heart right now. I encourage you to think of somebody you could invite to try it out. It's all online, so you can take it from anywhere. You don't have to be here at Saint Benedict. You don't even have to be here in Halifax. So check it out. Because here's the truth. If this extraordinary event is true, if Jesus really rose from the dead, it changes absolutely everything. And because Jesus is not dead, he's alive. And he speaks to us just like he did to those first disciples on the day of his resurrection when he came to them. We heard his voice in the gospel, and to them he says, just like us, he says this, "Why are you frightened? And why did doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet and see that it is I myself." See, in other words, that I am alive. I am here. I am with you. So draw near to Jesus. Listen to his voice. And do not be frightened. See, Jesus, he is here. Jesus is alive. And Jesus lives forever.